Welcome to episode 91 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. Welcome here. I'm glad you're taking a listen. Please subscribe. Please tell your friends. And you know what? Write an Apple Podcast review. That would just be so exciting for me because I haven't got very many of those. All right. In this episode, you're going to hear from FAAF. You're going to hear from Tom Schimmer and Connie Hamilton. And you're going to hear from Lainey Rowell and also Dr. Neil Gupta. Actually, these are my thoughts that I'm sharing from what I listened to them. So here we go, episode 91.
I'm Angela Kelly Robeck, host of the Empowered Principal Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAt5 or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey PLN, Wednesday, September 28, 2022. This is my first segment for week of episode 91 of Fresh Air at 5, my podcast. And the reasons I haven't gotten out for a walk on Monday was that I took my wife and friend to the airport as they are going on a grand vacation to Asia at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I had to go home and go to sleep. And then Tuesday, I was recovering from being so tired on Monday that I didn't get up. And well, now here I am, and I'm up and I'm out the door walking and enjoying the fresh air this morning. It's been really full and rich this September, and that's also made me tired. Just dealing with the challenges with our new learning management system and me just being a learner in this space so that I can work with my student learners as they are digging into content and trying to figure out how to send me messages and all that stuff. And then our challenges with our Microsoft accounts and changing and getting those going so that we can be innovative and supportive of a test pilot in our district. Some days I wish I could just not have to do that, but that's okay. We aren't, growing by sitting on the couch. So I'm up and at it and pushing on these different parts. Talking to the different people that have the ability to make change. And as a staff, we are growing as a result of that. Okay, that's what's going on with September. It's Orange Shirt Week here in British Columbia, and Thursday we have Pro D. We have an Indigenous conference for our whole district. Everybody from clerical to custodial to teachers to support to admin are all part of our Indigenous conference is happening tomorrow at the Abbotsford Sports Centre. And then Friday is Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada as an acknowledgement of the government with the Indigenous communities that we need to understand truth. We need to reconcile. All right, I got more to say, so I'm coming right back. So that's just me catching up. Carpenter, catch up. All done. Okay, here we go. One more thing for September 28, 2022, here in episode 91 of Fresh Air at 5. I was privileged to listen to and talk to you about episode 116 of the Che and Pav Show. Che and Pav bring us content through relationships. Nope, it's backwards. Relationships through content and how they use the content of their curriculum and selectively choose opening activities at the beginning of the year to understand and build relationships with students through read alouds and writing tasks, and how they can provide the students an opportunity to respond, and they learn about the students as information, not for the sake sake of leveraging a relationship to get students to do more work, but because relationships are important in the classroom space. Had a comment once that, Mr. Carpenter, you share way too much of yourself. And, what about the content? So maybe I was a bit narcissistic in those times where I was talking about the content and how I was making videos about our outings on the weekends too much and bringing too much Carpenter to the class. I don't have fly fishing videos on my walls or pictures on my walls, but I do share some of my passions and my joys of being in the outdoors with students. Does that alienate some students? It possibly could, those that can't get outside. But I got to keep that in mind as I am sharing myself and wanting to hear from them so that I can get to know them better to understand them. So, take a listen to this. The swag bag is full and rich, and one of those bits is about being narcissistic as a teacher, that you're bringing too much of you to your classroom space, as opposed to, just sharing a little bit and watching it grow. So students are important, students are awesome, and if we didn't have students, it would change the way we have our classrooms, because they make our classrooms alive and rich. FAAF, thanks so much for your thoughts. Appreciate this, and I'm definitely having this as the definitive answer for how to build relationships. Just kidding. Bye. Hey, PLN, September 29, 2022. Today is Pro D in my district. We are having a district-wide Pro D event called Walking Together. It's an Indigenous conference that's going to be happening at the Abbotsford Sports and Entertainment Center, and all of our employees in district, teachers and admin, and even a couple other private schools in the city are going to be coming together to learn about truth and reconciliation and where we're at right now, about taking care of our Indigenous communities around us and getting along with them. So I'm looking forward to it. I wasn't all week, because it's another day of lost instruction, but it's not. This is instruction for us as adults so that we can share that more with our students. Yesterday we had Orange Shirt Day at our school, and we talked about that with our students, as well as on Tuesday, because we're not going to be seeing them the rest of the week. And so we did those kinds of things. And it's important that we be mindful of being kind and caring and compassionate to one another and our Indigenous communities within our country and in our continent, around the world, have really been affected by acts of colonialism and pushing our way into their space and not being respectful. All right, so that's what's going on today. And tomorrow's National Truth and Reconciliation Day, so another day to pause and reflect and to honor those who have suffered at the hands of those who are pushing the suffering and their own agendas. So how do we behave as teachers in light of this? This morning I listened to the Tom Schimmer show, and Tom, I noticed that you stopped putting episode numbers on your shows, and for me, episode numbers are like a reference number. So if you'd like, I would appreciate if you'd just put episode numbers back in. Then I can say on episode number 82, I'm not counting to see how fast you're doing them, but just that it's a label to put on it. So anyhow, from September 26th, Tom has his podcast, The Tom Schimmer Show. I'm going to be talking about that in the next couple of segments here on Fresh Air at 5, episode 91. Hang on. One more thing for September 29, 2022. As I'm out for Fresh Air at 5 this morning, I listened to The Tom Schimmer Show from September 26, and it's titled Can You Be Led? And then Connie Hamilton, and also looking at the discrepancies in formative and summative assessments and how that affects our grading and assessment practices. All right, so at the outset, can you be led? Tom, I really like what you had to say there in your Don't At Me section. And Can we be led? Can we be led in our buildings? Can we be led in our country? Can we be led as people to do things? You talked about the difference between insecurities and arrogance and how those two positions are limiting in people being able to be led. It takes a certain amount of humility to follow someone, and it doesn't mean that you're weaker because you're following, but it means that you acknowledge you don't have all the answers, but you're maybe not so insecure to get up off the couch, or so arrogant that you're gonna take and listen to somebody else. So I like what you had to say there. Take a listen to Tom's argument. It's a fantastic argument, and I agree. And looking at as we're moving forward, even as a country, can we be led as a people? All right. In second segment, you talked with Connie Hamilton, who is an educator, and she has a book called Hacking Questions, 11 Answers That Will Affect the Culture of Inquiry in Your Classroom. And Connie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us as you talk with Tom. I appreciate hearing about inquiry and asking questions, and you make a distinction between the questions and the quality of the questions and the act of questioning, and how do we question in our classrooms and dig to get information out of our students, taking the time for pause, making room for not knowing, and having that discrepant answer persist before it is corrected. So things like that. Coming right back. I'll be right back. Thanks, Connie. The last thing for September 29, 2022. All right, continuing my thoughts on the Tom Schimmer Show from September 26th, as Connie Hamilton is talking about hacking questions and 11 answers that will change the culture of inquiry in your classroom. I like the way you talked about this. I thought I was done a moment ago, but I'm not. And Connie, the whole act of questioning and putting pause and getting students to be reflective before, during, and after with how you get them to set up strategies for working through the questions and the problem solving. What's your strategy as you move into this challenge that you do know how to solve or you don't know how to solve? And what are you going to do to promote and continue your learning? I like that idea of metacognition at the outset and reflection early on in the process, as opposed to at the end, what did you learn? Because we can ask the question, what do you expect to learn today? You're coming with some ideas about this, and what do you know already, and what strategies are going to have in place to solve this problem. So I'm going to start using some of these ideas as I work through some of the task items in my classroom and teaching tools. All right, Tom, finally, in Assessment Corner, you talked about the fracture between summative and formative assessment and grading practices, and how we have standards-based learning, and then we have our grade system with percentages and just differences of those. Okay, there's a lot to take in here. There's 6 ideas you presented, and you should take a listen, people, to what Tom has to say about this. It's still about getting language in my head so I can be a more effective assessor of learning. Tom, I appreciate you. Have yourself a great time as you're wrapping up in Arkansas, and enjoy your dinner on Friday evening. And that's all for today, for Thursday. Have a great day. Bye. Hey, PLN, September 2022, the last day of September. Today is National Truth and Reconciliation Day, Orange Shirt Day. I'm going to get into that in the next segment, but right now, I just want to talk about a podcast that I listened to this morning on Fresh Air at 5. Had an opportunity to sleep in because today is a day off from school for National Truth and Reconciliation Day. I listened to episode 25 of Evolving with Gratitude with Lainey Rowell, and Lainey had on guest Dr. Neil Gupta. She confesses that she started her podcast so that she could talk to Dr. Gupta and other people that she wants to talk to. And you know what? That's a great reason why to start a podcast. It allows others to listen in on those conversations, Lainey, Fantastic. So Dr. Gupta, great to hear your voice. Great to hear your passion for education. Great to hear your gratitude and your thankfulness. Great to hear that you're a Christian. I'm a fellow brother here in Canada, and it is so important that we point to our spirituality for affecting our lives. Lainey, yourself as being Roman Catholic, we have these practices and rituals and things that we do that are so important to us being the people that we are. Dr. Gupta, you talked about pointing to another, and that is so important that we are pointing out and shouting out those that have fed into our lives and made a difference. That's really, really important. Also, you talked about gratitude being an intentional thankfulness. It's always easy to be thankful when things are roses, but when they're not and they're thorns, we have to look for the good in those things and remember why we're going through the thorns and things like that. Losing your job, I can get that. I lost my job. Actually, I became a teacher. So much better for it now. I was a chemist at a pharmaceutical company, and we had a hostile board takeover, got sold, and laid off. So I could have grumbled. I did for a moment, but I had to get on with it. And now I'm so thankful to be an educator in my space, working with young people. All right, with that, I'm going to say have a happy Friday, and we will talk to you and listen to you soon, Lainey. Have a fantastic weekend. Okay, bye-bye. The last thing for September 30th, 2022. This shouldn't be called the last thing, but this should be called the thing. For today, the thing is National Truth and Reconciliation Day. It is a day where we talk about the hardships and the unfortunateness that has happened as a result of residential schools here in Canada in the past with our Indigenous communities. It's Orange Shirt Day that began in 2013 as Phyllis Westad told her story about her shirt being taken from her when she went to residential school for the very first time in 1973. It took her 30 years to tell her story. Maybe 30? 40 years to tell her story because it was so hard and painful and got pushed down inside of her. National Truth and Reconciliation Day is a day where we as a country need to be intentional about moving forward. It's not about us and them being the Indigenous communities, our First Nations, Métis and Inuit communities, but it is about all of us together acknowledging our role and place in what has happened and what will happen. It's about the future. It's about moving forward. And yesterday in our school district, we had a district-wide, for the first time ever, all of our school district employees in one place at one time at the Abbotsford Sports and Entertainment Centre, where we were exposed and presented with an Indigenous conference called Walking Together. This has been in the works for a couple of years because last year for COVID, we couldn't join together and have this conference. But in this conference, we heard from Three Crows Productions, who has a team of speakers and presenters. Two of those presenters were residential school survivors. Oh my goodness, these two gentlemen got up and shared from their hearts with tears in their eyes about how they were treated and tortured as boys in these schools. Another lady, she shared about her grandma and about her ancestors and how that had been pushed away and pushed down and culture being erased. We've got genocide in Canada and we don't want to talk about it, but we need to talk about it so that it never happens again. All right, with that, be mindful and wear an orange shirt today. Peace. Bye. My one word for 2021 is appreciate. I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, Podcasts for Educators, Podcasts by Educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.